All right. Hey everyone, how's it going? Jeremy Langlois here, coming to you live from Houmas House Estate and Gardens. And today we're cooking shrimp and grits. I mean, every chef, you can't be a chef in Louisiana without shrimp and grits. It's one of the most common items you'll see on all Louisiana restaurants throughout all of Louisiana, and anywhere doing Louisiana food, shrimp and grits is a staple. But like a lot of things here in Louisiana, whether it be gumbo, whether it be jambalaya, or whether it be shrimp and grits, every chef has their own recipe, every cook has their own recipe. So it's one of those things, there's thousands of different recipes that we have out there. So let's go ahead and get started and let's talk about it. So these are one of these recipes I like to say we're going to do it in real time, meaning by the time you get to the end of this video, everything will be prepared. I have a few things chopped, but this can come together pretty quickly. The thing that actually takes the most or the longest to cook is the grits. So let's go ahead and get started with that, because whenever we come back to cooking the actual shrimp part of the shrimp and grits, we can do that in just a few minutes. So I'm going to go ahead. I got me a hot pot here. I'm going to add a little bit of olive oil, and I'm going to start by throwing in, this is some diced up andouille sausage, and I'm going to get that in. Now, if you're right off the bat saying andouille sausage and grits, what's going on here? Well, first of all, I don't know if this name has caught on yet, but if you go to our recipe, which will be on our Facebook page, and also we keep all of our recipes on our website, or houmashouse.com, I've kind of coined this term for this style of grits as jambalaya grits. And the reason I call them jambalaya grits is because I love grits, but I think people don't realize just how versatile grits can be. I treat grits like the Italians treat risotto. You can have many different types of risottos. I think we can do the same with grits, and I'm such a jambalaya guy. Favorite thing to cook is jambalaya, and I always like the different variations you see on that. So, for example, if you're from Louisiana, you're familiar with pastalaya. It's where you prepare, it's a pasta dish, but you prepare it exactly like you're preparing jambalaya, but you get to a point, instead of adding rice into the dish, you add pasta to the dish, and it makes this great kind of pasta. So I thought, well, let's do that same treatment, but with grits. Let's kind of get all those flavors we think of jambalaya, but instead of adding rice, we're going to add grits. So we kind of get the best of both worlds. So I have that andouille sausage cooking, and just trying to get a little color. And then the next thing we're going to do, like many of our dishes, we're going to go in our Trinity, chopped onions, celery, and bell pepper. And we're going to get that going right into here and just start to kind of have those saute. Now again, man, you know, when I was growing up, it's so funny. I was growing up and I hated grits. I thought grits were terrible. I just didn't care for them. Well, I think that's because if you'll see everything we're doing here, it's all about your ingredients. To have better food, just use better ingredients. The grits I kind of grew up with, sorry mom, who I know is watching this, was the white grits with the old man on the front. You'd boil them in water. Maybe, if you were lucky, there'd be a pat of butter in it and some salt and pepper. And to me, that was just this nasty goop I didn't care for. But man, if you take and really use this as an opportunity to add great flavor, this sausage and these onions, and now we're going to go in with some garlic and just some diced tomatoes. Now, a recipe I did a couple weeks ago, sometimes what I do, if a recipe calls for diced tomatoes, I love little cherry tomatoes, and for some recipes, I'll just split the cherry tomato into two and put that right in. Now, look at all these great ingredients, and I mean, if you were in here right now and just smelling all this, it smells fantastic. And already, these are going to be unlike any other grits that you've ever seen before. So we're just going to let that cook for a second and come together. And now we're going to talk about the liquid for the grits and the actual grits themselves. Now the grits that I'm going to be using are yellow stone ground grits. I actually get them straight from the grist mill from my mentor, Chef John Fultz. He has a grist mill, and I grind them. However, I've had people ask me, where can you find these yellow stone ground grits? And these are really what make this dish. You get a good quality grits, not the white container with the old man on the front of the little box. I've seen these in the dry bins at Whole Foods. Also, another great resource, if you've never considered it, for some of these dry goods or lots of goods, is Amazon. If you're an Amazon user, you can type in Yellowstone ground grits, a little 1-pack container come in, and you can actually have them shipped straight to your house. And if you haven't tried them, I can't urge you enough the difference that using a good quality grits compared to those instant grits makes all the difference in the world, and then just adding this flavor just elevates it even that much more. So I got all these good vegetables cooking, and now I'm going to go in with my liquid. Now when we're cooking grits, just like when we're cooking rice, there's always a ratio that you want to use. For rice, it's, you know the term, 2 to 1, meaning for if you have 1 cup of rice, you're going to need 2 cups of water, 2 to 1. Well, with grits, the ratio is 3 to 1. So if I have 1 cup of raw grits, then I'm going to need 3 cups of liquid. I have 2 cups of grits here, so through the magic of math, I'm going to need 6 cups of liquid. Now again, this is where you can decide. I used, and if you've never tried this before, do this. I'm just using milk as my liquid. And that's just going to make this great, rich grits that is already going to, oftentimes, some people will make grits and they'll cook them in water, but might add a little heavy cream or some half and half at the end. Well, this, I feel you kind of get the best of both worlds. We're just starting with this milk, and it's really going to just make the grits nice and creamy. So I got 6 cups of milk in there, and I'm now going to add my 2 cups of yellow grits. Everybody with me? I'm going to mix that in real good. And then we're just going to let that cook for a little bit. I'm looking for it to come up to a boil, and as it starts to boil, it's going to start to absorb all those grits, and they're just going to kind of just start to cook a little bit. This is a good point too, where you might want to taste with a spoon. Anytime I'm cooking something, say rice or grits, where a liquid is going to be absorbed into the thing you're cooking, I always like to add a little bit of salt and pepper at that point, so that seasoned liquid gets absorbed into your grits, and it just helps distribute some of that flavor. So I'm going to go ahead, get a little salt and pepper in there, and start to cook it. Now, because these aren't instant grits cook in about 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. They cook really quickly. These grits take anywhere from 10 minutes to 20 minutes, depending on how hot your pan is. And we do want to watch the temperature of our pan because we do have ingredients like milk in here. I have a nice thick bottom pan. I don't have this on full blast because the last thing I would want to do is scorch the bottom of the pan. And we don't want that because it'll make everything just taste burnt. So we're going to kind of watch that. We're going to let that come up to a boil. Once we see it start to bubble away, I'll then kick that temperature down just a little bit and let it bubble away. And every couple minutes, we're going to come back and give it a little stir. All right. So now let's move on to the shrimp part. We got our grits cooking. We'll come back and check on those at the end. Now it's time to put our shrimp together. I already started when we got here, just for time purposes. I went ahead and if you look down in this pan, you can see that there's a good bit of melted butter in there. And the reason for that is we're going to saute our ingredients in here, but we're also going to use that butter. We're going to add a little flour shortly, and that's going to become our roux. So I like using butter because it makes a nice rich roux whenever we go to thicken it. It's going to have a great flavor. If you're concerned about having too buttery, whatever that means, you could use a canola oil, but something like this, you really get a really fantastic flavor from butter. So I like using the butter for it. Now that we got our butter melted, again, the cool thing about Louisiana cooking, we start off with such similar ingredients all the time. I've done so many of these cooking demos with you guys, and I would probably say 80 to 90% of them, we're going to throw a little onion, celery, and bell pepper in it. It's always just that fantastic base that just gives us so much flavor. So I'm going down, I'm cranking my heat up. I'm going down with a little bit of onion, celery, and bell pepper, and I'm just looking to start to sweat these vegetables and have them start to cook. I'm also going to add a little bit of garlic. So that's going to go right in. Let's talk about the shrimp. As my grits start to cook, I see they're bubbling away, and that's exactly what we want. And I'm giving it a little stir, and even as I start to stir this, I feel a little bit of stickage on the bottom, so it's just good just to constantly keep this moving so you don't get that scorch on the bottom. As long as you're kind of stirring it, it doesn't take long to cook, so just kind of babysit it a little bit, give it a stir every now and then, you're going to be just fine. It's bubbling rapidly, so I'm going to turn the heat down just a tick. Our vegetables, our onion, celery, bell pepper, garlic are cooking away in that butter, exactly what we want. Let's talk about the shrimp. Look what I got here, y'all. I got some great tail-on Louisiana shrimp right out of the Gulf of Mexico. Now, you have a couple options that you can do here. Some people will just take a whole shrimp with shell on and this, that, and other. I don't like to do that because whether they're doing barbecue shrimp or a dish like that, I'm never a fan of having to peel the shrimp whenever you're trying to eat them in a nice dish. So it all depends on how much you want to peel your shrimp. So I got the shrimp peeled and deveined, head off, but I left the little tail on. I like the tail. It's part of the presentation. It makes the shrimp look really nice on the plate. If you're not worried about that and you want to pop the tail off, that's fine. However, another trick I like to do sometimes is I'll actually peel it and leave the head on, because anytime you can cook shrimp with the head on it, there's so much fat and flavor that's in the head of the shrimp. It always elevates that flavor of the shrimp, and that's something that we always want to do. Man, my grits are bubbling away here. Look at that. Let me turn this thing down. It's one of the good things about being a chef. I always have someone to come behind me and clean. All right, give that a little stir. Perfect. So now that this is cooking, the reason we started off with so much butter, I mentioned earlier, we're going to use that for a roux. What I'm looking to do is just sprinkle a little bit of flour into this butter and mix it with a spoon. And I'm going to add flour until I pick up that butter and the butter's not loose in the pan anymore. So we had a good bit of butter in there, little bit of flour in there, mix it around, it starts to pick that up. This is going to be our thickener. We're going to get that in there. And now you can see I don't really have like this loose butter in the pan anymore. The flour has really started to pick up all of that butter. And this is our thickener. I'm not so much worried about measuring because I'm going kind of by feel. I pick up the butter and now I'm going to add shrimp stock. If you're at home, I'm a big fan of the box broths. If you don't have access to shrimp stock, chicken broth is absolutely fine. It has a great flavor that'll go well with this. If you don't have chicken broth, just put some water. It's not the end of the world. All these recipes are flexible. Anytime I add liquid to a roux, I add a little bit in and stir. Let me show you what that looks like now, guys. Now it's just that roux is instantly starting to thicken this, but as you can see, that's way too thick. So instead of worrying about measuring, all I have to do is add a little sauce, stir it in, add a little sauce, stir it in until the sauce itself is the thickness that I want it to be. And that's a sauce consistency, just meaning thick enough to coat the back of a spoon. So I've added some in, and you see it's thinned out, but it's still very thick and goopy. So I add a little bit, and then we want to bring it to a boil. Liquid, whether you're using cornstarch, whether you're using a roux that we have here, cornstarch or sauces, they don't reach their full thickening potential until it comes to a boil. So if it doesn't boil, you'll never know how thick it is. So at this point, this is very similar to how, say, maybe you would make an étouffée. But we're going to get in there. This would be a great time. A little white wine would be fantastic in here. Some lemon juice. All that would be fantastic in here. I'm going to come back, season this with a little salt and pepper. And now I'm going to go in. And if you were doing this for a dinner, you could have all this ready right now. And then what I would do is, right before you want to serve it, just bring your sauce up to a boil, and then in goes your shrimp. And your shrimp are going to cook in that beautiful liquid. And then shrimp cook so quickly. It only takes a few moments. It'll be done in about a minute. And you know, whenever I first started as a chef, just if you're kind of a newbie in the kitchen and you're just starting as a chef, one of the things, you know, I used to always worry about either undercooking or overcooking everything I was doing. I'm adding the little green onions. Well, shrimp is a great thing if you're new to cooking. Man, this is a great dish to do if this is one of the first things you cook, because shrimp are really difficult to mess up because nature itself tells you when shrimp is done. The shrimp will start to turn that beautiful pink. They'll start to curl. Bam, you know it's done. And it doesn't take long at all. Whereas if you try to jump in and try to cook a perfect mid-rare steak all the time, well, that becomes something that is a little more trickier than just cooking something simple about shrimp. Now look, now I'm going to do something I don't often do, but I have my friend Jessie behind the camera over here, and I want to ask her a question. She prepared this exact recipe a couple weeks ago, and the woman was texting me every 5 minutes all about it. You said it was what, too thick whenever you did it?
Ribs were too thick, sauce was too thin, but all I did was use your trick, add a little flour to the thin sauce, add a little extra cream to the grits, and it was all good. Well,
first of all, that was pretty good. That's good, Jessie. And yes, I'm looking here. My grits are a little thick, so you can always come back a little more milk, a little water, just a splash. You see it saying, oh, that's kind of thick. That's like I'm looking and saying, oh, it is a little thick, and I can tell that the grits aren't fully cooked right now. If I were to taste it, it would still feel a little crunchy, and it's already really thick. Well, that just tells me, yes, let's add a little splash of water in here, and then just kind of keep it going. Now, as far as this being a little too thick, first of all, we can't trust Jessie because we all saw her 2 weeks ago when she cooked here, and she put the ingredients in reverse. So I don't know what to tell you about that. This seemed to work perfect for me. Just kidding, but no. A way to alleviate that is, look, Jessie, I never measured any of this. I didn't measure. I just added a little bit of flour, and then I keep adding the stock. Instead of just blindly dumping all the liquid in, I always add just a little bit, just at a time. Oddly enough, do you know that if you measure out a cup of flour isn't always consistent, because flour is, let me see if I get the word right, hydroscopic? I don't know if that's the right word, but meaning it absorbs humidity. So oddly enough, in different parts of the world, flour naturally absorbs moisture. So a cup of flour isn't always exactly a cup of flour for everybody. So you want to be flexible, and as much as just blindly following these recipes, just use them as a guide. But now I've gotten to a point where, like I told you, it just takes a couple minutes. Boom, my shrimp are cooked. Now, for time purposes, I would let these grits go just a few minutes longer. Like I said, they take about 20 minutes, and they've been cooking for about 10 minutes. But I think we're close enough to go ahead and plate up. So let me get a spoon. And man, I made a mess here today. What's going on? We're going to go ahead and look. We're going to take a scoop of that jambalaya grits with all that sausage and onions, celery, bell pepper, a little bit of tomatoes, and that's perfect. This is a great point. If you wanted to, you could add a little cheese or a little extra butter. That right before you serve it, I would add that right into it. And then we're going to come back and just start topping it with some of these shrimp and a generous amount of all of that yummy sauce that we have. We'll come back with a little more green onions on top. And there you go, my good friends. Shrimp and grits. What's your favorite way to cook shrimp and grits? Or barbecue shrimp or anything like that. What's your favorite French shrimp dish? Comment in the comment section. Love to hear from you. Until then, guys, take care. We'll be serving this at our Carriage House restaurant Friday and Saturday. We'd love to have you out. It's been so beautiful here in Louisiana. Now that's finally cooled off a bit and we're not getting scorched with 90-degree weather every day. Y'all take care. See you next week.